For those of you who are joining us, welcome to the Oracle Inn podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by Kevin and Laquan, and we are getting into our second segment today, which is where we're going to talk about the pros and cons of a college education, which I think ties into a lot that we've been talking about with recent events. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Because, I think it can go either way, but what is the value in getting a college education? Why bother going through that system when you have the internet, you have all the information you could possibly ever need to know freely available in front of you?
I think the way it's disseminated too as well can definitely be a positive impact on a person as well. Because yes, the information is on there, but do you know how to decipher that information? Do you really know how to apply the information? Sometimes having somebody who's a duty expert in that field, really break it down to you, share real world applications, and really kind of give it to you in a way that you can understand and digest it, take it, add your own sauce to it, and put it back out there even better than you received it. I think there's something to be said about that. So,
Kevin, what do you think?
So, I was actually thinking about this today, which is the value of a college education has very little to do with what you study. And to me, it has a lot to do with that you learn how to think. And that I can't say that that's true for every college, right? High school high school is remember and regurgitate, right? Once you hit college, depending on your program, I'm not saying anything that's universal, but once you get into college, a lot of it is, I'm not telling you what the answer is. You tell me why the answer you have is correct. And you get people to start thinking and reasoning in a way that that is otherwise not really condoned in society, right? You don't get this growing up. You don't make the case to your parents about why you're going to the party. You try, but at the end of the day, it's I want to go. You certainly don't get it from church. You don't get it from the military. You only get it from this higher education. And when I say only, obviously there's other ways. There's other paths to knowledge. But the most universally understood is going to be that college education.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because there's two schools of thought. One of them is that you get a liberal education, which is that you cover so much terrain and you go in so much detail that you really get a very broadened sense of the world, as opposed to something like a trade school where you go there because you have specific skills that you're going to be certified with by the end of it. And I think that's important.
And I think so. I really, really like Mike Rowe, the host of Dirty Jobs and a bunch of other stuff. He's actually out there arguing against Bernie Sanders on the college thing, saying, essentially stop telling people the only way to education is a college degree. Trade schools, we need plumbers, we need, welders, we need electricians. Why would you tell someone who's only going to be a plumber? Like, that's their destiny to go get a liberal arts degree. Let them be a plumber. Like, why are you?
And you might disagree, but we need thinkers too. So yeah, you have the people who are, who are the applicators, but you need thinkers though, because when you look at the campaign trails and stuff, and not just election, other elections too, when they go talk, to some of these, plumbers and stuff like that. And this is, I'm not generalizing, I'm saying, but some of them don't have that critical thinking element, so they get had, right? So like these politicians, they don't understand what's going on. They hear rhetoric and they're like, oh, okay, he's for us. But they're not, that critical thinking element is not there. So they can't weed through the BS, So they really see, is this person for me or not? It sounds good, so I'm going to go with it. You sound smarter than me. And that really is the kind of theme a lot of people have. If you sound like you know what you're talking about, then I'm going to go with you, because I think you have my best interest in hand. Whereas somebody with that critical thinking element, and it's not all, but I'm saying mostly, you can be like, well, hold on for a minute, man. Let me ask you a couple questions. And those questions is because I've listened to you, and now let me see if you align with what I'm thinking.
Let's flesh that out a little bit. What is critical thinking?
Okay, so I'll tell you the sky's blue. Hey, why is the sky blue? To me, I see it this way. It's like, it's not taking it for what it's worth. It's diving in, dissecting it, and really trying to flesh out the truth, so to me,
The way I describe critical thinking is a 5-year-old. Why? You have to go to bed. Why? Because you need to get rested for tomorrow. Why? This endless why is the beginnings of critical thinking. Where you start to lose that is because I said so, now shut up and go to bed. Where you don't let them really explore the why. Why is this? Why am I supposed to sit? Do the Pledge of Allegiance? Why am I supposed to listen to my teacher?
So do you feel like we're just not teaching young adults how to question?
Yeah.
It sounds like
we spend 18 years telling them to shut the fuck up. What do you mean? Like, it's sit there, raise your hand if you want to speak, and the teacher will decide if you're of value enough to actually, use your voice.
Think about this.
That's the entire education system.
Think about this, Eric, for a second, and Kevin. Imagine I'm in U.S. history in high school, right? And we're going over, Black history, where slave events or whatever, or if I'm a Native American or whatever. And the teacher starts, giving me stuff out the book. But I know some of the stuff that's in the book, there's more to it than that, and I raise my hand and I want to contest the information that you are sitting here spewing to the class with some truth that I've researched. How do you think that's going to go over? At that point, you're thinking I'm challenging you as a teacher because you're supposed to be sitting there shutting up and just taking this because you need to remember this for the test. We're not trying to remember your truth that you've researched, Laquan or whomever. This is what's in the syllabus, the rubric or whatever. This is what's going to be on the test. You're wasting time because I need to go on to the next subject.
Yeah, and we see this a lot with locally here with NAU and Flagstaff. What you're seeing is, this is from the state level down. This is mandated. What they're trying to do is push out degree mills. Pay your money, sit there, shut up, pass the tests. We're going to make them as easy as we can to get as many people graduated as possible, and that's it. It has nothing to do with learning. It has to do with selling you a piece of paper that you have to meet certain criteria to be handed. And that's not the state of education universally. There are colleges, there are programs, there are degrees that allow you the freedom to say, you know what, everything that you just said to me was bullshit, and here's why. But those are not the rule. Those are the exception.
Noam Chomsky said, it's an indoctrination system, K through 12, and it's, I like Noam Chomsky, Noam, N-O-A-M Chomsky. I don't know how to spell his last name, but he did say that, public education is an indoctrination system, and so in the points that we're making just really goes to support that, because it really is buckle up, don't touch anything in the car, and I'll let you know when we get there, which is graduation after 12th grade.
Yeah. So what's interesting about that, though, and I'm taking a course this semester on adolescent psychology, and there are plenty of studies that show that adolescence carries well into, your mid 20s. So I think they said up until about the point of 24. Now, do we actually see that there's more critical thinking? You start really asking deeper questions instead of, which way do I turn? Instead, it's like, why am I going somewhere? So the questions and the context change a little bit, and I think I don't know, like long term, it's hard to know if that's a good or a bad thing, because by also delaying that, it delays adulthood into later years, and we are pushing the average lifespan further and further along. So it's hard to see right now if this is really a bad thing or if this is just where we're at because human populations and the construction of civilization have gotten to this level that this is what we're kind of naturally supposed to do. And I hate saying supposed to because there's no way to prove that, but it just seems like, yeah, it definitely, I think, robs those early 20s of understanding the importance of a democracy, understanding the importance of debt, understanding those type of responsibilities. And now it's like we're kind of backlogged on that. And that's why I think we're seeing our country go to rich old white guys instead of maybe middle class America.
And I think it's interesting so you just said democracy and debt as those are the two things that are critically lacking from especially K through 12, and especially, let's say, 6 through 12, right? This idea of democracy and the idea of understanding the fiscal system. I mean, you can, so there are some civics classes out there. I don't want to say, but I never saw one. I never knew anyone that took one, at least in the school districts that we went through. I'm sure people took a civics class, but I've never actually had to sit through one. And that's, to me, that's a huge problem. You know, in math, did you ever go through, hey guys, we're going to talk about tax accounting today. We're going to talk about, you know, let's use some of this math for a practical real world example. No, it's the Pythagorean theorem. You memorize this, and you're like, for what? You know, I always tell kids that, you know, it's like, I don't need to know that math. I'm never going to use that again. And I tell them, I'm like, listen, I use algebra daily, but that's about it. Anything north of that, I don't really ever use. So I had some years of math wasted that could have easily been, you know, basics of business or taxes or, you know, whatever, getting to the nitty gritty of how to adult properly once you leave this institution. But it's just not happening. And you have to think, is it not happening by design? Is it that they actively leave that part out because it wouldn't behoove them? And them, I mean, you know, the Illuminati, whoever the they out there that are controlling everything, the power elite.
I think it's on purpose, you know, in my opinion. And I say it like this because if you taught credit card management, if you taught what an APR is, if you were taught what happens when you default, you know, on something, and then you get that extra interest on top of that, it raises, you know, a banking account, you know, checking versus a savings, you know, investment tools and stuff like that. I'm not saying you have to go like super deep, but if you taught the basics, you know, you wouldn't see a lot of high school kids in debt, you know, getting their first credit card, running up the credit card bills. You know, go ahead.
No, I think you're kind of covering the other end of that extreme, and that's that not every kid needs that.
Exactly.
Some of them, sure, they could use more focus on that. And that's where, when I think about the system, I think that it's inherent in the system to fail because we keep trying to apply a one-size-fits-all. And where we think we're making progress is that we change sizes, but we're still practicing the same thing.
It's still one size fits all. We just said instead of a 10, we're now going for a 9.2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's not working because then you'll have students in there. They get it. They do get it. And yet you're holding them back now from achieving. And that's where, you know, I just look at it as, you know, you're basically trying to cut a stream from the river. And it's not going to happen if we just keep trying to divert the whole river every time. And it's like, just let things apply where they need to for the student that needs it in that classroom. And that's where I think we fail.
What's the solution then?
We would have to completely rethink the way that we do school. I mean, I always thought it could be more of like a Socratic process where, you know, you have teachers who have their class and it's just open doors. They're going to be there 8 through 12. It's your responsibility to get that course passed and maybe feel it out that way, and let them decide a little bit earlier on where they want to spend their time and where will they exceed, and try to shift things up a little bit.
But then how do I get you to be a manager at Dairy Queen if you're actually thinking for yourself?
I don't think it'll mean that those jobs still won't be fulfilled, but it might mean that they might think twice about how they run the business and where they get the resources. And
yeah, I mean,
so
there's a movie called Accepted. It's a Justin Long movie, but so Lewis Black's in there, right? And he goes off on this rant of the base premise of the movie is they start a fake college because Justin Long doesn't get in it anywhere, so he starts his own college, and it's all complete bullshit and fake. But they get people to start paying them tuition and everything. So it's actually a pretty funny. It's a pretty good movie. I like it. But Lewis Black goes into this rant in there about how, you know, all college is creating pimps and whores, buyers and sellers, you know, commercial. And, you know, he basically gets caught in this rant, and Justin Long's dad is like, so what are you saying? He's like, well, you only do it to get a good job. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that's true. But it's like that piece right there, just the only reason to go through and do all this nonsense is to get a good job so you can make money, so that you can make more money than your parents, have a better life than your parents. You know, it's the same shit we've been doing since the Great Depression. And at what point do we actually start thinking about, hey guys, maybe we need more? There's a huge danger really looking at revamping the education system, right?
Well, that's happening right now anyways. I mean,
yeah, you get the the charter and religious school people in charge. They're make no mistake about it, they're going to fundamentally change education, and it's not going to be to make people better thinkers. They're going the other way with it.
right. They'll have like a Bible certification.
Yeah. I mean, so the value of a college education comes down to me to learning how to think and how to question. That's it. If you can get that elsewhere, go get it elsewhere. You don't.
Oddly enough, one of the other biggest values I think in a college education is the social component of that. You're going to sit next to people who are distinctly different than you. They think differently than you, and they will occasionally voice themselves, and you will have to engage in either at least hearing it and listening to it or responding to it, and then learning what the appropriate way to respond is. So I feel like we do undermine that whole part of education, which is, yeah, you're acquiring knowledge and you're definitely acquiring skills, but how you apply those in social environments, I think, is one of the most crucial aspects of a college education.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to go. I don't think college is the only place you can get it, which is good, right?
Where else can you get that level of interaction and engagement?
Work,
rec centers,
the gym. I don't know. You go out, there's other people, and you say something stupid, and you get told a lesson.
Bingo night on Thursdays.
Yeah, it happens. I do agree. I'm not arguing saying that you're wrong. I do agree, but I don't think it's only in higher education. I think it's more common in higher education. But what we're seeing is a massive whiting of college. They're trying to keep the wealthier white folks in college and everyone else out. Well, I mean, we live in Arizona, so I can speak for Arizona, right? Where they actively want to get a certain group of people educated because those are your managers that in their mind, right? Those are the people that need, but they're not really going out. You look at the Dreamers that under the Obama administration is like, hey guys, come to college, learn, do. What we're seeing is a complete flip of that now. And it's no. We don't want you to learn. We don't want you to question. We especially don't want you to have degrees and influence. What we want you to do is leave. And if you, I don't know, it's a very, we lose that special element that you're talking about.
Yeah.
If diversity isn't as big an influencer in the rooms.
Yeah. What about you, man?
It's kind of piggyback on the collaborative element, in higher education, being around other people. I think that's because those inspire ideas, right? Because you have one way of thinking, almost like a horse blind, way of thinking, you kind of look at it one way, but being around like an Eric or being around a Kevin in that educational environment, a higher level that's challenging all of our minds to see how different people respond to it. That's inspiring. And that might help shape the way you look at things too, as well. So, and I personally feel I don't see how you can really get that in other places, like, because that is a designated place, designated content, a higher level that's challenging everybody equally. And to see each person respond different based off, how they grew up and this how they see things, to me, that is priceless. The information in itself, you just kind of look at it and you kind of take what you need from it and you be like, okay, cool, I got it. All right, you know what? Eric said this. That was great. He don't even know that he said something that was a gem. Let me take that and incorporate it here. It's a toolbox. Let me put that in my toolbox right there because he said something great. Kevin might be like, you know what, Quan? Damn, I didn't even look at it like that. Man, that dude is crazy because that's a collaborative effort. You know what? Let's all start a business together because we all have a set of skills that's going to work with each other seamlessly. And I feel like we're going to be very successful. You're not going to get that at the gym. You're not going to get that at a rec center or any place else because this environment is specifically constructed for that particular situation, which is higher education. You can talk about theories and concepts in those other places, but in that particular area, it's to inspire and to like just expand your mind. And to me, that's invaluable. For me, going through college, that helped me out so much.
And I absolutely know what you're saying. And I've been in had those conversations in class, but a lot of that is on the teacher, right? Does the teacher allow that free thinking a bit? Or is it, guys, we need to get, I've literally had teachers that when someone just asks a question, go back and reread the slide and that's it. That's the level.
I'm not talking about in class. I'm talking about like you can take that information out of class. Hey, let's talk offline, guys.
Yeah.
Like what do you think about I've had those too. Like what do you think about today's discussion? Here's the notes I took. This is how I interpret it. Yeah, there's a lot of teachers to be like, listen, I don't got time for this. I'm not getting paid enough to hear what the hell you got to say. So
yeah. So I mean, I guess that's why I think it's not necessarily just college. Give a couple of 20-something white dudes a big bag of weed and listen to them have these same conversations. Granted, it'll be a little bit more aliens and Illuminati, but there's other places for this besides just the university. The university, that would be great if that's what it was. Like if we really got a lot more of it, but we seem to be moving away from that, which is the scary
community
part.
Colleges, though, at least for me, really play a vital role. And I've gone to like 4 or 5, I think, in total when I was trying to get back.
Keep getting kicked out, or?
No, it wouldn't stick. I was just trying through my 20s and I wasn't feeling it, but I was always interested. So I'd like take one class here, one class there. And it wasn't until, I started to hit my late 20s that it really clicked that I have a thirst for knowledge. And this is a place that just has this endless waterfall.
Yeah.
So, well, we're at about the time limit for this segment. Do you guys have any closing remarks? I'd like to come back to this, man. I think a college education and just talk about maybe education more broadly too. It's important.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of talk about, because it's easy to complain about what's wrong, but it would be interesting to kind of look at what would an ideal educational system look like, see if we can play with that idea a little bit. And I guarantee that we're not all going to agree on what that's supposed to look like, which in and of itself is the problem, right? How do you get everyone on board to make things better when cultures, values, biases, everything play into what people believe and what they believe things should be.
True. Q, any closing remarks before we go into our third segment?
No, I think we covered a lot of it, and I know this is something that we'll touch on, in a future podcast. So I'll just leave it at that for right now.
Okay. All right. So for those of you who are joining us, welcome to the Oracle In podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by Laquan and Kevin, and we're going to get into our third segment today, which is looking at the value of space exploration. So last week we talked about a recently discovered solar system that is about 41 light years away from our solar system, and apparently they have found a couple planets that resemble Earth-like qualities. And part of this discussion, I think, is getting into what is the value of that? Why do we have to pour taxpayer money into this? Why does it create jobs? Why does it, play such an important role in school?
So first, I think it was NASA put out, hey, what should we name these planets? Do yourself a favor and go look up some of the responses on Twitter. But I think one of the things we were talking about, so there is this idea, right, of what is our place in the universe. And there's only so much you can get from terrestrial land. There's only so much you can get from telescopes and that sort of thing. You have to kind of look beyond to really start to say, okay, I know that from an educational standpoint, I understand how physics and everything work on this planet. Are those universal? Can we go look at other stars, other planets? Does this hold? Do we actually understand the fundamentals of mathematics and physics and time and all this when you actually move beyond this, third rock from the sun?
Yeah.
Plus, rockets.
I think it's vital. For me as a kid growing up, that was actually one of my passions. In middle school, late elementary and all through middle school, I would ask my mom, hey, can you get me a telescope? I would buy, I'd get a telescope for Christmas, like a really nice telescope. I always wanted to know that, there's something else out there. Even to this day, here I am at 35, I just know there's more out there, right? And there's just no way in the world that we're the only planet in this whole universe that inhabits life. it just doesn't make any sense to me. So maybe they're holding some information. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, I'm not gonna go down that road. But I'm just trying to say, like, I think that's the value of space exploration and stuff like that, is because I know there's more out there. You know, this just can't be the only planet that inhabits life forms. You know, and so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for anybody out there that might be debating that in your head, I would just like to, keep in mind that what we can directly observe through telescopes rather easily are stars. And in the Milky Way galaxy, do you guys know how many stars we have?
Couple trillion?
Not quite that many.
No, it's a trillion. I know these things.
I
don't need your facts.
Not one of the alternative facts out there.
So
in our 100 billion
in our galaxy, it's anywhere from 100 to 400 billion stars. Yeah. And the reason why that has such a large range in there is because if you think about our solar system being a flat disk, if we're on one little part kind of on the outside, it's really hard to see what's on the other side. And, even though we have technology that's, gaining in innovation, it's still challenging. But the point is, we have about 100 to 400 billion stars in our galaxy alone, and what we have mapped of the observable sky is about 400 million other galaxies. So when you do the math on that and you see how many stars are out there, and then the chances of those stars having solar systems and the chances of those planets being in the habitable zone and having a chemistry that can mix well to create organic compounds, now you start to get into the potential for life. So,
and I mean, it's in the millions, if not higher, as far as potential habitable planets. So,
it's got to be larger than that.
Millions, trillion. I don't know. I mean, it's a big number that are these
think about it like for every star, if you have anywhere from 4 to 10 planets.
Well, and some stars don't have planets, but when you look at it, it's almost mathematically certain that there's at least a microbe somewhere else.
Right.
And that's all, okay. So I like to think that there are little green men and all that kind of thing. I'm not going to go down the conspiracy theory that they visited us, but I think that we're not unique and that there is advanced life. But what I think you're hearing from a lot of the science is we think that the building blocks for life are common enough, and that this specific thing that is the Earth, the Petri dish, is common enough that it should have happened at least somewhere else.
You ever heard of the Miller-Urey experiment?
Don't
cheat.
I have not.
I love Kevin's like, give me a second. I know.
So Wikipedia says that it's a chemical experiment that simulated the conditions thought to be present at the time of early Earth and tested the chemical origin of life under those conditions.
So basically what Miller-Urey did, what year was that? Was that 1953?
52.
What he basically did in a laboratory is that he said, okay, if we think about where the Earth was in the beginning of life and we try to reset the clock on the Earth to where all the chemical elements would have been trapped underground, our atmosphere would have been very different. He said, okay, well, I want to be in a laboratory with these glass tubular looking things, and I want to set up those conditions where you have things like ammonia, you have carbon dioxide, and things that would have been in our atmosphere. And he said, I'm going to hold these together in an environment that would also be the temperature of the Earth at that time. And I want to see what happens. I want to see if chemical bonds start to become unwound, and then they start to find new bonds, and then what would that wind up creating? And what he discovered is that in his experiment, he successfully had trials where he had the beginnings of organic compounds. If on a molecular level, you look at what makes something organic, what gives something those qualities, that naturally happen. It was, I think, later in the 90s or in the early 2000s, somebody wanted to challenge that and say, like, well, you probably weren't accurate because of the technology back in the 50s. So let's re-update this experiment to what we now know about the Earth and carbon dating and all of that stuff, and fix the variables and see if it does the same thing. And sure enough, they had successful trials of that as well. So if you do have the right chemical ingredients, the right temperatures, you can have something grow from it.
Yeah, there was 5 that in 1952, and then this has a volcanic spark discharge experiment using the same base premise, and I don't know, 20 things, and then that was in 2008. 2010 they did it again, which H2S rich spark discharge experiment. And it's, they got everything. I mean, these are all fancy words that, simple country folk like me don't understand, but they're the base blocks for life is what we're seeing. And yeah, I mean, it's right there. That alone tells you, hey, let's go look for that. Since we think this is how it worked, can we go find that?
So what's the value of that, though? I mean, when we really think about, we've talked a lot about it this last election because we're focusing so much on human beings and having jobs and people getting their livelihoods and having security. What is the value of that? How does that overall help us in the long run?
Well, it gives us ammunition to tell the creationists to shut up, which is always good. But I think what it does at its core is it helps us understand the complexity of life, to really look and analyze, like, are we special? Is this common? Is this not common? Are we, who are we in this great big universe? And you cannot get that without getting to as close to an understanding of the entire makeup as possible, right? You can't, otherwise you're just saying, well, this guy over here said that it's because, this God created everything. And you're like, yeah, but there might be more to it. We need to know more.
Q, what do you think? He was checked out. He was texting. He doesn't even know that his mic is muted. He was checked out. Your mic is muted.
No, I wasn't checked out. I was actually doing some research on space exploration. So, and that's what we're talking about, right? Space exploration, right? Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, it's a lot of things, like even like going out to the other planets and stuff like that. But even for our own planet, just still learning more about our own atmosphere, and being able to predict with more certainty, maybe natural disasters or weather patterns and stuff like that, based off that stuff, advancing our own technology. Those are just things that I think about. And also, I feel like the carrying capacity of this Earth will be reached soon, so at some point we need to figure out what the hell is our plan B, because Earth is plan A. We don't have a plan B right now. And the way we're mowing through resources and, destroying this planet right now, we might want to, get to trying to figure out if there's other inhabitable places, for this growing population. So I think that's what's important about space exploration too. Creates new jobs. There's a lot of things, to it. And I think it's very important. And also just the wonderment, right? Just like thinking like, man, when you look in the sky at night, when I used to live in Alaska, the Northern Lights, of course, it's just light off the glacier stuff. When you just look, you're like, man, I wonder what's out there, It's just those little things as a kid you look at, you're like, man, I wonder what's out there. Not really about, is there aliens coming out here, but what's out there? Because, you take the religious element out of this, you just can't tell me there's no other planet that don't have something on it. It just doesn't make any sense. We are not unique. We're unique to this planet, but we are not unique to the universe. I'm pretty sure there's some other people out there with higher power telescopes from other planets being like, look at these mofos over there, thinking they special, but seriously, on a serious note, like, dude, for real.
I mean, when you look at it, Ancient Aliens is popular for a reason, because it taps into that piece, which, okay, yeah. So if someone ever is one of your friends that's telling you it's all true, there's on YouTube, Ancient Aliens Debunked. It's like a 3-hour YouTube thing. You're like, yeah, guys, listen to these guys, because they just ripped apart every argument you guys put forward. But having that show, it shows that people are, when they look up at the stars, there's questions. What is out there? Something is out there. And when they look down at the Earth, they're like, is this it? Are there things that are mysterious in the past? And could it be that there's a better explanation than the ones we're hearing now? And just that sense of wonder alone, I think, is hugely valuable, because you get people thinking outside the box.
Well, one thing that I think has actually helped us in terms of making our environments cleaner, and this is what I think is so troubling about what a lot of Republicans are trying to do, which just doesn't make sense to me on a very basic human responsible level, And that's that with space exploration, we've also been able to compare and contrast our planet more firmly against others. So there's a lot more that we can learn as far as, wow, these conditions really are kind of rare, or at least the next possible one that's closest to us is what did we say it was? 41 light years in terms of miles was like some
170,000 years as fast as we can go.
miles away. Yeah, it's a really long ways away. But what I really appreciate about this is that if you think about the importance of NASA and how our federal tax dollars go to pay for NASA, NASA, as of let's see, 2011, had a budget of $18 billion. Now, here's what's important about this. $18 billion is a lot of money that goes to a lot of different projects. We have telescopes all over the world. We have spacecrafts. We have the International Space Station. So there's a lot of things that those billions of dollars go to. But if we think about it in terms of the whole entire federal budget, that's half of 1%. So we take a very small amount of our budget to do some of the most explorative human endeavors ever known to our species and life on this planet. One thing that I wanted to bring up here, and this is on Wikipedia, so if anybody wants to challenge its validation, by all means, shoot yourself out there. So this right here is the budget from 1958. And what's interesting about this is that what you can see, make that lighter there. What you can see is that if we think about, in terms of actual dollar amount and then percentage of the federal budget, it's fluctuated. But during the 60s, you're getting up to 3-4%, which is, it's getting significantly larger in terms of proportion. And then it starts to go back down again. And then it starts to go a little bit back up. And then it comes back down. And now we're at one of the lower times that we've ever budgeted out for NASA in our country's history. And yet this new administration is talking about making cuts to NASA. Like, that's where we need to be focusing these cuts on.
NASA so and PBS.
Yeah, exactly. These are very, very, and that's the thing, is that they grab headlines, but it's not actually impacting our debt or our deficit at all.
Well, the thing that I find incredibly funny. Okay, so I wanted to point out, for anyone that doesn't really understand why it went up in the 60s, that's when, JFK basically was like, dude, we're going to the moon in 10 years. And there was a space race between us and Russia. Russia got to space first with Sputnik, but we got to the moon first in 69. So that's why that money spiked as high as it did. And then in the 80s, there was definitely a resurgence of space exploration. You had Halley's Comet, which was, that kind of, anything like that really gets the juices flowing. But yeah, it's, I don't know. I think it's funny that people are going to complain about how much money NASA spends on their cell phone. Because the technology that we've gotten from NASA, okay, Pang alone, right, is worth $18 billion a year. Maybe not, but the number of things that they do that have come out of, like, the technology that comes out of the space race and the space, it's huge. It's huge.
That is huge.
Yeah, there's a lot. And so just to kind of piggyback off Kevin, like, I was just kind of doing some research, and so they were saying, like, a couple things that we've that we have from space exploration, which is the cell phone camera, clean energy technology, scratch resistant lenses, water filtration and purification, and CAT scans. Think about that. Think about all those things I just mentioned, and those are very important things that we use on a day-to-day basis. Think about, every phone now is like, oh, this great camera on your cell phone. Look where that came from.
Well, look about it even in terms of defense.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine when Google Earth went live and countries out there that had no idea that that's a consumer product that's for free? I can look at your house if you live somewhere in Africa. You know what I mean? Like, that's powerful to put people under that level of surveillance and then to let them know that. So I think it's interesting that, the way that I kind of see this is that what I think is happening is that we are seeing that this new administration wants to devalue space exploration and say, oh, it's not needed. We don't need all of this. Because in my opinion, I think they're going after all of the climate data that's coming back from those satellites. I think they want to hush that up for a while. They want to put coal country back online. They want us to start drilling all over the place, all over again. And it's a last desperate attempt to take the last of our resources. And that's what they're going to fight for.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that assessment. You know, I think that, and it's like we were saying earlier, they're not even trying to hide it. It's not, this isn't even a secret anymore. They're, you know, we don't want to spend money on that because there's no value. You know, climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese to, you know.
And in proportion to the rest of the federal budget, that means nothing. Eliminating that budget would do nothing.
Well, what did he say? He wanted to up the defense budget, which none of the defense generals and stuff say is needed. 54 billion.
I think that was the number. Yeah.
So what is that? 3 times their budget that he could that he's wanting to just go blow on tanks that we don't need,
or fighter jets that I'll never see the light of war. So I mean,
yeah, like.
But yeah, I mean, it's all about oil and stuff like that, you know. So I don't know. I mean, again, we think about that 1% that's actually in power right now. It all makes sense. You know, a lot of that money is tied. So what you were saying, like they're drilling all over the place, Eric, a little while ago. So you got to keep the integrity of that. You know, we cannot afford to be going to any other source at this point in time because all their business is tied to oil. Their business is not tied into renewable energies. You know, so that whole climate change and everything else that Kevin was talking about, yeah, they're going to try to hush that up because it threatens them and their money.
Well, I mean, you look at the head of the EPA is, you know, basically been caught with his hand in the cookie jar of fossil fuels when he was the Attorney General of Oklahoma, I think.
Oklahoma.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So Oklahoma is now dangerous due to earthquakes caused by fracking.
Well, who's surprised by that?
No, but let that sink in for a second. We have actually started causing earthquakes because we refuse to put up solar panels. Like,
yeah. I think a lot of people just think, hey, if you dig in the ground, you could dig in the ground. But if you think about the way that the ground is constructed, all you need to do is hit the right tension point and you will break rock, like large plateaus of rock.
What the geologists are saying are these are all dormant or dead faults that are now waking back up because we've lubricated the shit out of them with all the benzene and crazy chemicals that, I mean, they take the chemical waste that is toxic. This is a toxic substance, right? There's people, if they do this near your groundwater and it gets in there, you can light your water on fire. Like this is that. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. They're taking that and just pumping it straight into the ground because they're using it for hydraulic fracturing. And all of a sudden they get to get rid of their toxic waste for free. Well, they get paid to do it because it brings up another product and it just sits there. Like,
so that's what I'm curious about.
To be fair, though, Hillary Clinton, in all of her stupidity, was also a huge fan of fracking. So we were getting this one way or the other, but it's just insanity that we're seeing fucking Oklahoma is getting hit by earthquakes that get bigger and bigger every year.
So here's a little prophecy of my own I'm going to put out there. If I'm going to be curious to see if this new administration actually takes root and the Republicans maintain this power, which they can do. That is a possibility. If they do that, I'm very curious to see what sort of regulations they're going to start putting on something like Google Earth. Because if people can start to find these things and they see satellite imagery of this, that's another threat that now they'll be looking at it at home of like, well, we don't want people looking at our own backyard, let alone what's going on in Africa.
Yeah, the national security gag tape would be put on. And I mean, to be fair, Google Earth is, depending on when you look at it, it could be years old images that you're looking at.
2012 or something.
Yeah, you're not getting good new data. So what we may see is just fewer and fewer updates.
Mm-hmm.
But and that, I mean, that's what NASA. I was just looking at the other day. It was before and after photos from their satellites. You know, here's pre-deforestation, here's post-deforestation, and because we have NASA, because we have the satellites, we're able to see this impact. And without that, it's out of sight, out of mind, which we know Americans are really, really good at.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to be going on with the environment. That's a whole other thing because kind of bringing it back to the topic here. If we're talking about what's the value of space exploration, it's more than just, oh, let's have, kind of a Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of moment where it's for entertainment purposes. And it's more for, no, this is actually data that we need because lives are going to be on the line without it.
Well, like I was just talking about Somalia, right? What's the value of space exploration? To be able to study our climate, to understand the impacts so that 100 people, 110 people don't have to die in 48 hours of hunger related to a drought, which is related to climate change. We can start to get in front of some of this stuff. And if we're not doing it, then we're just, sticking our head in the sand and saying, if I don't see it, it's not happening.
So I want to share this too, real quick. When we're talking about, what this stuff looks like, this is a pretty good example. I mean, these are satellites that NASA helps to oversee, and this is showing what happens in deforestation. I believe this is in the Amazon, and that's what we're noticing. That you have these farming and ranching operations that are out there, but give it 10 years, and look how much more of the forest is slowly being eaten away, and that's going all over the world.
One of the real scary ones is when you look at freshwater bodies, lakes, big lakes, that sort of thing on the planet. And you look at them over like the last 10, 15 years, and you can just watch the beach get bigger and the water get smaller. So, yeah, I mean, understanding, even if we don't go even to the moon, even if all our exploration is, related to this planet and we just simply go right above the atmosphere to be able to look down, that alone has immense value. And I mean, whether we go out like cockroaches into space and go colonize another rock is secondary to being able to understand this rock.
Yeah.
I just wish we could just be honest and just accept the data for what it is. I think there's, the big thing when you think about, we talked about climate change a little while ago, is that it's so disrespectful to the professionals, who spend countless years, hours, blood, sweat, and tears acquiring this data, and put it into a form to disseminate to the people in a way that we can digest it. But yeah, we have the administration people like, oh, that's BS. Like, this is somebody who went to school, and that's their whole life. It's like telling a doctor, nah, man, I don't believe you. Nah, I don't know about that. But so you're going to tell somebody who's a professional, that they don't know what they're talking about, that the data collectively, they're all saying is all true, but you don't want to believe it. I just wish we can come to a point where we like acknowledge it, be like, okay, cool. What can we do to fix it? I know it's not going to happen, but
yeah, not with the way our country's set up, because we're so focused on becoming a salesman for the American dream, when the reality is we cannot all live the American dream. There are simply not enough resources for that to happen. So, Kevin, did you want to add something?
No, I think at the end of the day, what we're talking about, and I think what Q's point really brings up is we have, since the 50s, we've been doing this, right? We have this immense data set that people can pour over and work. And people have, they get a PhD and they go and spend 30, 40 years learning how to look at this planet and all that. And we're just, it's just insane that we're going, well, Jethro, my next door neighbor, he's got an 8th grade education, and he says that you're full of shit, man. And that is what's leading the way now. So when it comes down to what is the value of space exploration and all that, so that Jethro doesn't get to talk very much about space exploration, that we have the data, we have the experiences, we have this knowledge that we can draw on and actually do something with. I mean, just getting out there and doing it, you learn so much more. I mean, think about what we knew in the 50s and what we know now. I mean, to say, oh, well, we don't want to do that anymore, it's insane.
And I know we're running over, but I just kind of want to say this is real quick. So to Kevin's point too as well, we've been doing it since the 50s, right? And there's been skeptics who have PhDs who have gone over these data sets and can't dispute this information. This information has been updated, the experience been ran over and over and over since the 50s until right now. And it still comes out to the same conclusion since the 50s. So how do you just dismiss, somebody's work, their life's work?
Well, wait, when you say since the 50s, what exactly are you referring to? Because space exploration's been before then.
No. We're talking about climate change and stuff like that as well. You know what I'm saying? It kind of
when you brought up the budget, it went back to the 50s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, because with that information that's out there, and like when they talk about it, like everybody around the world, who are in those professions are looking at it, trying to dissect it. But yet the conclusion is still the same. But yet, we still like, it's bullshit. That's just, to me, that's so fucked up. If I was a scientist with a PhD, I'd be like, wow, like really? Like just like that. You just dismiss my work, even though all of it's right here in your face, so, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's part of what we're also waking up to right now, which is that we've left too many people behind with the tribal-like mentality instead of a truly enlightened mentality of infinite knowledge. And I think that's why we have a lot of back work to do. We left a lot of people behind.
Bring on the damn aliens, because nothing is going to unite us. Nothing's going to unite us like an invasion, man.
That's how Trump got here. That same concept.
It's true. All right, guys. Well, we have gone over. So any concluding remarks?
Russia beat us into space.
Yeah, but we'll get the last word, right?
Not in these 4 years.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for watching. We'll be back next week with some new topics. And hope everybody has a good night. Thanks, everyone.